Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Radio Entrepreneurs with me doing my imitation of Blue Man Group as we are presenting today from Suffolk University, Startup Boston 2023. A lot of stories of entrepreneurship and leadership, as Radio Entrepreneurs always likes to produce. Our first guest here is Wendy Slone, CEO and founder of bTECH. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Well, Wendy, I've read a lot about you. Well, maybe not a lot, but I've read some about you. And you have a very interesting background, and so is bTECH. Can you tell our listeners about bTECH?
Sure. bTECH is focused on providing help to people who have diabetic foot ulcers, but we also want to expand into other areas that deal with any kind of chronic wound. And we use a nanoparticle biopolymer patch that is like the size of a 2x2, 2x4 that we have been able to impregnate with far infrared light. And you can pretty much put it anywhere on the body. So you're not constrained to putting it onto the bed of the wound. And that's to help patients be able to manage their wound efficiently at home. And we're focused on helping to increase microcirculation. That's a fancy way of just saying helping to bring more oxygen, more nutrients to wounds so that the wound actually heals from the inside out. And we're a great complementary product, so you can continue using if you're using like a duoderm or some kind of other second skin. You can continue using those. So we're just a great support to help bring a good, conducive environment for healing for you.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to make it a little personal so I can understand this a little bit better, if you don't mind. Sure. Next week will be my deceased mother's 100th birthday. And in 1954, she became a brittle type 1 diabetic. And in a certain point of her life, she got a cut on her finger that turned to gangrene, and then she lost her finger. So if she were alive today, you're telling me that you would be able to help prevent people like my mother from having to lose fingers, toes, which is fairly, I guess, was common with diabetics. Is that correct?
Yes, and that is true. That is true. My mom was a diabetic as well. And this is how bTECH actually got birthed, out of love for my parent. And I saw her develop diabetic foot ulcers in both of her legs. And she had to have the amputation. So I said, there's got to be something else out here. And I started doing research and I came upon light therapy. So I'm going somewhere with this, Jeff. I'm going somewhere to answer your question. And so that's how the Halcyon Smart Patch got birthed, was out of love for a parent, using light therapy. So miniaturizing essentially the same kind of effect that you would get from a large laser if you went into a doctor's office, but making it so that you could use it at home in a concise, small packaged, patch-sized device. So yes, you're absolutely right. Our goal is to help to prevent that amputation so that you don't lose limbs, you don't lose toes, you don't lose fingers, by helping to make a really healthy environment for healing. When tissue heals, what happens is it kind of makes gaps. I don't know if people are going to be able to see this on the podcast, but skin wants to be tight. It wants to be really close with each other in order to actually make sure that the wound doesn't open up again. And unfortunately, that's what happens in a lot of diabetics. That wound will open up again, or it doesn't close at all over a long period of time. So it sets them up for infections, and it sets them up ultimately to maybe devolve down into having to have that amputation. And that's what we're trying to do, is help to prevent the amputations.
Well, again, I keep remembering the experience that I went through, that my children went through, looking at my mother and the pain that it caused for her. And it's quite an accomplishment. So let's get you into the Wayback Machine and get a sense of your background and how you sort of got to the point where you could sort of work on this solution.
Yeah, so I started out my life in college as a science major. Always had a love for science and technology and how things worked in the biological space. And I was actually pursuing a master's in biology at one point in time, and I got hurt while I was working here locally at a local hospital. And so I kind of pivoted and I went over into public administration. I noticed like apples and zebras, right? And I ended up getting a master's over there and a PhD, but that love of the science and technology and how we can actually use science and technology to help people's lives was always there in the background. And so when things started happening with my mom, I actually went back to school, got a degree in health sciences, and then got myself actually accepted into another PhD program focusing in analytical chemistry. And that was because of my interest in nanotechnologies and biopolymers and how do you actually build devices that patients can use. And so that's how I landed up in the space of actually developing the Halcyon Smart Patch.
Well, you're not just a scientist and an entrepreneur. You're what we call a serial entrepreneur. So you've had other entrepreneurial experiences as well. Could you give us a little bit of that background too?
Yeah, I kind of unintentionally fell into that in college. I was always good with statistics and numbers and being able to help people see how to manage their programming. And so my cohort of students in our PhD program came together and we started doing business here locally, providing data analytics is what they call it now. But back in the day, I'm aging myself, it was just called statistical data. And so I was very prolific at that and eventually fell into a place where I was working with a local company here that does programming for NASA. And that allowed me to really use the science knowledge that I had and marry it with the technology of the data pieces and help to inform NASA education department on how to hire and recruit talent for life sciences, retain them, and particularly in the area of minorities. So not just African Americans, but also with women who are, kind of trying to level up right now in the space of life sciences.
Wow, so exciting. And clearly having talent makes a difference. So when we look at bTECH over the next 2 years, what can we expect in terms of the businesses rollout, the products rollout? I mean, I assume you want to work with more than diabetics.
Yes, that is absolutely correct, Jeff. We are interested in anything within a chronic wound space. And so we're starting with diabetes. Again, that was because that's my love with my mom, and that's how we got started. But we want to roll into burns. We want to roll into surgical wounds that don't heal. There's also wellness. So if you have, you've been maybe had a cosmetology procedure and you want to smooth out that scar so that there is no scar, we want to move into that. And then just overall general well-being. So for instance, with the DoD for the people who are flying our aircrafts or even in commercial pilots, they what we don't realize, let me just use this analogy, is Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk says, oh, let's take everybody up into space, and going up into the suborbital floor. Well, when you go into space in microgravity and you're there for long periods of time, microgravity mirrors and mimics chronic wounds. And so people come back into gravity. So astronauts, for instance, and they may have issues with, connective tissue and things like that. So how do you keep that wellness for them while they're in microgravity so that when they come back, they don't have issues with their health? And so those are other areas. We're also interested in veterinarians, so dealing with animals. They have wounds just like we do. And so how can you help them manage their wounds as well? So we have a platform that I liken to Coca-Cola when Coke entered into the Coke wars with Pepsi, and that they had one formula and then they began to diversify themselves into a family of products. And that's what we're interested in doing at bTECH.
Well, I love when you tell me that you're going to get into the whole category of pets. If you could minimize that whole cone of shame that most dogs and cats wear, that would be very nice, very sweet.
Yes.
Currently, how are you selling your product? Is it through hospitals, clinics, doctors? Can it be sold to consumers? How do you work it?
Yeah, right now we're not in the market yet. We are anticipating starting a soft market launch 2024, early 2025, after we get through some of our, clearance stuff with FDA. But in the process of that, what we are targeting is doing B2B. So selling to like hospital systems, wound care systems, and then eventually moving it out into the big box stores. So like the CVS's, Walgreens, and things like that.
That's all very interesting, and I appreciate you being on the show today. We hope we can connect with you again through the year as you actually launch the product. We've been speaking with Wendy Slone, CEO of founder of bTECH. We are at Suffolk University today, and this is Startup Boston 2023. Wendy, if someone wants to learn more about bTECH, how would they find you?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's www.btechls.com. There's a link there where they can actually send me a message, or they can actually reach out to email at wslone, SLONE, at btechls.com.
Wendy, I want to thank you very much for that wonderful work that you're doing to make it easier for people. And I look forward to you being immensely and the company immensely successful. Please come back to Radio Entrepreneurs.
I thank you guys today for having me on.
Thank you. And I apologize for my blue skin. I'm sure there's a cure for that as well. This is Radio Entrepreneurs.